man, for what we got going on tonight. Welcome back to Calling All Beings. I'm your host, DJ, back from Austin, TX, where our special guest is from. And we are here, have a very special episode, 1 month waiting. And I'm going to tell you, this one's going to be worth waiting for when you see who we've got. And I know because you're here, I know you know who we got. So before we do any of that, let's introduce the executive producer and technical director of Calling All Beings, my man, my brother, the co-conspirator in fun, entertaining, and interesting UAP talk, Monet Nathan.
What's up, everybody? How's everybody doing? Happy Monday. Very excited for this one. Like you said, been waiting a little bit to have this show, but we've made the impossible possible. We've got the right guest for that tonight. So
dripping with irony. I love it. Right there, just below Nathan is Money Nathan. There goes Julie. Right there is the researcher and soul and keystone of CAB, the one, the lovely, the talented, the one and only Debs. How are you, Debs?
I'm doing great. I'm happy that we can update the archive.
There's another one. I love it. I love it. And you know, Debs is kind of like a Brazilian barbecue, man, because she's always bringing something to the table. Always. And you know what she brought this time? She done brought this homegirl right there working on her own PhD, OGG. Really smart. And we call, she is, you know, she's our prospect, right? In this 1% CAB gang, she's our prospect. And she is none other than Courtney Connected.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me back. I'm excited about being here on the panel tonight with Dr. Jeffrey Kripal.
Oh, she just announced it. The man himself, the chair of religious studies and thought at Rice University, the man who is the caretaker, the curator of the archives of the mostly impossible, but possibly possible, the man himself, Dr. Jeffrey Kripal! Man, Dr. Kripal.
I am so not as cool as you all are.
Oh, you are you are so much cooler, man.
Oh, no. I am boring compared to you all.
You know what? You're our friend, James Indoli is like, this guy, Dr. Jeff, you know, you've got to have him on. I was like, would you give us the go ahead? You know, would you tell Jeff we're okay? And he's like, yeah. I was like, dude, done. After hearing him talk, I'm like, yes, we definitely want him on Calling All Beings. And last time you were amazing, and this time I know you'll be equally amazing. And that kind of like, Jeff, kind of brings me to like the first thing, which is for those of you who are PhDs in this topic, it's sort of there's a lot of pressure. You know, people have you on their show and they want answers. They're sort of doing the Jack Nicholson, you know, kind of thing. They want the truth, you know, all this kind of stuff. And they want you to unlock these mysteries of the unexplained. And I thought of you the other day. Actually, I was in the grocery store and I sort of bought that Dave's Natural Bread, and I came home and I was thinking of you, and it begat the first question. And the question was, you know, you have this sort of organic bread, and you take the little white thing off after you untie it, and then you can never find that fastener. So I'm wondering what happens to that fastener, Jeff.
I don't know, DJ. I really don't.
It's unexplained.
No, I don't know.
Something's happening to it, and we just don't know. Maybe Sean Kirkpatrick.
Yeah, it's sort of like the sock, right?
It's the sock, yeah.
Sock of the dryer. It just disappears. Yeah.
It's going to apparate.
I'm going to tell you one for real, Jeff. All kidding aside, I sleep with a mouth guard, obviously, to keep my teeth from grinding. And if I don't put it in a mouth guard case, I've had 2 of them literally disappear. And I have 3 cats in the house, full disclosure. I do not know what's happened to those mouth guards. So now it goes in the case every night. I don't know. So anyway, all right, let me turn you over to Money Nathan for a serious question while I kind of regather myself here.
Okay.
So, all right.
That was incredible. I just want to say thank you for that. So Jeff, it's great to have you back with us. We really had a great time with you last time. I wondered kind of how you're doing, right? So the more that you've been out there in the space, the more that you've been talking about the impossible things that clearly do happen in the human experience, you're probably hearing more impossible things or more impossible sounding things. How are you navigating kind of probably the deluge of information that you're dealing with now in that space?
Not well. I mean, my sense is that it's overwhelming, that, people have these experiences all the time. And when you speak about this in public, and when you try to do this in public, then people write you, of course. And I get all of these long emails, and I can't answer them, Nathan. And it's not that I can't answer them, it's just that there's not enough time in the day. So my feeling is that we're in this ocean
Mm.
of impossible experience, and there's no capacity to really deal with it and to create a community, at least yet.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I'm curious too, in the academic community that you're a part of, have you heard from more academics who have said, "Oh, Jeff, you kind of given me a chance to tell you about this story that I haven't told anybody before"?
Yeah, no, I think academics are, first of all, I love academics. I think intellectuals are really cool. And I think they want to talk about these things, and they know that they happen. What they don't want to do is sound like the tabloids.
Mm.
And so they're looking for a voice, or they're looking for language to talk about things that they know happen all the time. And maybe they've had the experience, maybe their brothers have, maybe their mothers have, maybe their grandmothers have, but there's someone in their family, there's someone in their immediate network of who have had these kinds of experiences, and they actually have the tools. And this is sort of my message to them. They have the tools to talk about these things, and particularly if they, this is going to sound silly, but if they have tenure, I don't know why they're not talking about it. I really don't. I I I tell my graduate students not to talk about it.
Hmm.
I don't let them do this in a dissertation, frankly. I don't, because I want them to get a job. I want them to get employed. But once they're employed, they're safe. And the academy is a pretty friendly place for these sorts of questions. But you have to be in it, unfortunately, to do this. But once you're in it, you're in it, and you can do it. So do it. That's sort of my message.
Love it.
Debsy.
Yeah, so first of all, I hope you're archiving all of those emails just like Whitley did with the letters he got. So I guess I was wondering what would be next for the archives. Is there going to be an evolution because of the deluge of contact and interest? What will be the next stage for the archives?
Yeah, so Deb, the archives, I mean, so I've been on sabbatical all year, and I've spent a lot of time, months really, in the archives. And the sense that I get from them is a kind of hopelessness, or maybe humility, maybe is the better way to put it. There's just so much in there. I don't know how any one person can possibly absorb all of that. I mean, there are 15 collections now in the archives. There's well over 1 million documents, well over 1 million. And so any one person who comes to them, I think, is going to be overwhelmed with just the amount of data. And so we're kind of in this process of anonymizing and digitalizing and applying some kind of AI to the archives, that to sort of get some sort of data out of them that can be useful. So it's frustration, I guess, is what you're hearing, Deb, or kind of humility, or just a sense of awe in the sense of the vastness of it all.
I will say I felt the same when I saw all the government documents. There
Yeah.
are so many, and they're, by the way, side note, more than people realize, because the CIA, for instance, was clever in not putting all of them in their designated folders. So, yeah, I
Of
understand.
course.
Yeah, I mean, so some of our archives are actually declassified, and they were originally, classified documents. The government, I mean, the intelligence communities have their own reasons for classifying things, but those are also public documents that eventually become public and become available. But just becoming available doesn't mean that somehow some kind of secret is dumped. The secret is embedded in the documents, in the data, but it's not apparent really to any particular. I mean, you can't just go into a letter or a series of letters and suddenly find the secret of the universe. It just doesn't work like that.
Homegirl. So I don't know if have you met Courtney already?
Yes,
Our
we have met a couple times actually. One at the Archives of the Impossible on the street as you were getting out of your car. I don't know if you remember that or not, but
No, I don't, Courtney.
it was wonderful. I mean, there was a gathering of us, all these high-level people walking in together. It was quite amazing. And then we also met again at the Soul Symposium.
Okay. Yeah.
You'll remember her as the sort of UFO interested researcher who should be donating hair to her host and colleague, me.
Yeah.
So, and by the way,
I'm
awesome
known by
shirt.
my
I'm sorry.
hair.
Go ahead.
Dr. Kripal, I have just a quick follow-up question for you. Nothing, major or in huge depth, but I remember at the Archives of the Impossible, Jacques Vallée gave his wonderful presentation. He talked about his experience with UFOs, and he talked about his collection that was coming into the archive. But I remember there was some parameters around it that they weren't going to be public just yet. What was the date again where they were going to be public, and what actually was going to be in his archives? If you could just refresh our memory.
Yeah. So actually, Jacques' collection is what initiated the archives. And please just call me Jeff, Courtney. It's okay. I'm a casual person. Jacques approached me in 2014, and in Berkeley actually, and he was asking about how if I could help him with some kind of university archive. And his interest was basically that, yes, his collection could go out on the antiquarian market and fetch a certain amount of dollars, but it would just disappear, into the ether, as it were. If it came to an archive, it would be preserved, and then future researchers could look at it and come to their own conclusions. But Jacques was really concerned about, I am sure, the information in his archive, and also his own mortality. I don't want to speak for him, but he put a 10-year moratorium on the collection, and the collection it's come in 4 different parts. 3 parts, and in the near future, a 4th part, and each of those collections have a 10-year moratorium on them. So it's complicated to explain. The first moratorium's up in 2028, by the way, and then 2030, and 2032 or 2034, whatever the 10-year moratorium is. So it's complicated. That particular collection is complicated. The other thing that we have to do, because it's a university archive, is we have to take it through something called IRB, which means Institutional Review Board. And the IRB is set up really for medical records and for chemistry and biology and these sorts of disciplines. But we also want to follow it very rigorously. And because some of the archives involve personal information, including medical information, we have to be really careful with some of the collections, particularly the John Mack collection, which is our most recent collection. So it's complicated, Courtney. That's all I'm going to say. Although it won't be complicated for the far future, or the near future, it's just complicated for us right now.
Before I get to my own question, I just want to follow up on Courtney's because both of you made me think of a tangent here that may be interesting. Given that there's several, as you said, different iterations, I'm assuming that you have had a chance to see, okay, so personally, what is the most compelling for you, with full knowledge that everyone on this panel may be compelled by a different work or a different aspect of it. What's the most compelling to you that moves you?
I think the experiencers. I think it's hard to locate a particular file or a particular document, but just the experiencers who have had these encounters and have been ontologically shocked by them is deeply moving to me. I take the experiencers seriously, which means I think that what they're reporting actually happened to them, but I don't take their experiences at face value. I think whatever they're experiencing in a kind of code. So there's a kind of, I don't want to say a deceptive quality to the phenomenon, but there's a kind of camouflaged quality to the phenomenon that really strikes me as a historian and a humanist, and the integrity of the experiencers, combined with this sort of deceptive or camouflage quality of what they're experiencing, is really what strikes me the most, I think.
I think that's what compels me most about the topic as well. Yeah, and I wasn't expecting like a specific case. You answered it exactly the way I just, the tangent of it, which genre of it. My personal question for you is, do you think that an opportunity exists where perhaps yourself and some of your colleagues like Diana and others that are from the religious studies community, if you will, could possibly engage with leaders of organized religion in search for a message that they could sort of convey to their what would you call them, Nathan, their individual churches? I'm sorry, I
Yeah.
know there's a
Yeah, the believers, basically the religious followers
yes,
flock. There's many different terms for it.
yes,
So by Diana, I assume you mean Diana Pasulka.
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Correct.
So Diana's a good friend and a colleague. So there's this conversation in the study of religion on whether the religions can essentially handle what most people would call disclosure. And there's sort of the far spectrum over here, I guess over here now, is that because of this vertical dimension that the religions possess, that they're capable of handling disclosure. But there's also this position over here on the left, I guess, or the right, whatever that is to you, that they can't handle it, and that the metaphysical or the ontological shock is so great that it's not translatable into any of the particular religions. I I'm actually more of the latter camp. Diana is more of the former camp. I think Diana is more inclined towards the position that the religions can handle it. I'm more inclined to the position that they can't handle it. And
So you're Colonel Jessup. Back to the Colonel Jessup metaphor.
yeah, I don't know if I'm right, but I guess I'm deeply suspicious of the religions themselves. I like this vertical dimension. I think they're correct that there's some kind of transcendence or some kind of other reality that's breaking into the human reality. So in that sense, I think the religions are really useful, but their content or their specific revelations, I think, are largely incompatible with what the UFO or the UAP phenomenon is suggesting. And so I guess I'm more skeptical of whether they can handle the full brunt of disclosure. And of course, disclosure presumes this is going to get down a rabbit hole, but disclosure presumes that somebody knows the secret, and so we're going to disclose the secret. I actually don't think anybody knows the secret.
I agree.
I think that the government and the military and the intelligence community and the religions, I think they're all essentially hiding their own ignorance around
Yes.
this. And so I'm much more of that camp than I am of the, oh, it'll be okay. You know, we'll absorb the revelation. I'm like, no, you won't. No, you won't.
Just to support your point, not that you need my support, but Jim Semivan, who apparently was much higher up in the CIA than I was aware, like operations officer, you know, like at that level of like, you know, operations command, if you will. He said as much. He said they don't know what this is. They can't explain it to you because they don't know.
Right.
And they don't like to try to explain things they can't explain, which is consistent with what I know about government. So
I mean, so I know I've met Jim, and I've spent some days with Jim as well. And my own feeling about the intelligence community and the military and the government is that they have particular tasks that they're concerned about, and this ain't one of them. And so when they say this is not our prerogative, or this isn't in our zone, I believe them. I think they're correct about that. I think this is a kind of shock to the system, the sort of reality system that people inhabit, and I don't think it's the job of the government or the military or their intelligence to negotiate our reality, as it were.
not in the mission statement, Nathan. Go for it, brother.
No, I doubt there is. So Jeff, I come from a religious background. I was in seminary, got the seminary degree, left the church a long time ago, but I grew up with the historical critical method of analysis of the text. I grew up in a progressive,
Right.
Christian heritage, and for those of you who don't know what that means, it means kind of looking at the text, the religious text, with a very critical eye, trying to understand the context of the day and situate that text within the context and the cultural context of the time, so that you kind of try to view it from how the people of the day when it was written may have understood the text, rather than taking our sort of current cultural position and imposing it upon the text. And found that to be fairly useful, but that approach also, at least when I was growing up, really discarded a lot of the more phenomenological aspects of religious text.
Right.
So here we are now kind of at a place in the 21st century where we're beginning to re-examine some of these accounts, and I think take them with a little bit more seriousness than we may have in the past. So do you see the way forward kind of reclaiming some of this, that we've, some of the parts of ourselves that we've discarded? What does it look like as we move forward here?
So Nathan, what kind of seminary were you in? What was it?
I was in so my professors were ex-Southern Baptists. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
Okay. So I was trained in that tradition as well. I mean, it was a Roman Catholic seminary, but it was very much the historical critical method. The way the historical critical method works is it basically throws out miracles, right?
That's
It throws out all the strange stuff, and it focuses on the stuff that it can understand historically and textually. I think what you're getting from this phenomenon, certainly what you're getting from me, is a kind of third space. It's not the Southern Baptist belief system. I'm not asking anyone to believe anything, but it's also not the historical critical debunking or contextualization. I think that basic religious beliefs are based on actual human experiences. And so there's a there, but it's a there that doesn't stay faithful to any particular religious content or any particular religious scripture. And that's difficult for people to hear. It's difficult for the religious believer to hear, but it's also difficult for the skeptical or secular person to hear, because I think there really is something being communicated that is not historical, that is not social, that is not even natural, that's intervening in our world. But I don't happen to believe the content of this scripture or that scripture or this faith or that faith, because I think those are all historical deposits of other people's religious experiences, which made sense to our ancestors, but simply don't make sense to us anymore.
Right.
So there's a kind of paradox here. There's a kind of affirmation of the religious inbreaking, but there's a deep skepticism around the traditional interpretations of that inbreaking, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And I find that we sort of forget that we should be applying a historical critical method to our own methodology of analysis, right? So we tend to think that we've kind of escaped that somehow.
My joke, Nathan, is why were your advisors in graduate school omniscient? Why were they gods? Why are the critical theorists whom you happen to think or believe, why are they right about everything? And why can't we apply the same historical critical methods to their thought that we apply to everything else, and be skeptical of our own worldview? And I think that's what we're being called to do, is sort of step out of our worldview or our belief system and sort of question it. And again, that's hard because people want answers.
Oh, yeah.
They want me to tell them what X, Y, or Z is. And I'm like, no, I actually don't know what X, Y, or Z is. And neither do you, by the way. So let's be honest about that. And that's a difficult position to be in, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Deb.
So I had to comment before I asked my question. When you were talking about the AI, what flashed through my head was Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yeah.
And I feel like you are striving to find the answer to the universe. And I
Right.
think that is a ridiculously lofty goal. And if you do get the answer of 42 when you have the AI run, let me know.
Yeah.
But I don't think that you should put that much pressure on yourself. That robot took thousands of years to give the answer 42.
Right.
So I wanted to switch to, you talked about worldview, and a lot of people may not have picked up on the fact that you are paying attention to the phenomenon as a global issue. And
Yeah.
that's really important to me. I'm really trying to talk about that as much as possible. I was wondering if you've noticed any patterns in looking at the phenomenon that way that people are missing because they get so caught up in their country and one group of countries.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the common mistakes people make is they think it's an American phenomenon. They think the UFO, oh, it's just an American obsession. And what they're of course doing is they're confusing the Hollywood reception and interpretation of the phenomenon with the total phenomenon, or with the total UFA or UAP reality. And what you see if you look at this is that it's a global phenomenon, and that it happens everywhere, and that it's always been happening, actually. And it gets picked up by different cultures, and it gets translated into religions or nation states today in a particular sort of way. But those ways it gets picked up are just as much reflections of us as they are of the phenomenon itself. And I think that's what you really take away from the global picture, is that the individual interpretations are cultural and historical, and they're not absolute. So that's what, at least what I take away. I'm very much a comparativist, Deb. I think of things comparatively. I think of things cross-culturally. I don't think that this is just an American obsession or an American military concern. I think this is something that's been happening for a long, long time all over the world.
And what would you say the biggest pattern is? Like that was the big part of
Yeah.
it. What is the pattern?
So the pattern that so there's a number of patterns I see. One is that it looks a lot like us, but it's not us. So it's sort of like us, but not us. If you gave me enough beer or enough
Oh.
alcohol,
Yes, we can. I'm sorry. Go ahead. No,
I mean,
go ahead.
well, there have
Continue.
been podcasters who've
Yeah.
actually sent me back packs of beer. If you gave me enough alcohol, I would probably say I think it's a future us. I think it's us. And the reason I say that is, first of all, it communicates with us. And it looks sort of like us, but it doesn't look like us.
Looks like me more than you.
Actually,
go
yeah,
ahead.
it looks like DJ.
Thank you.
No, but and so that's a pattern I see. The other couple patterns I see is one is it somehow involves sexuality. There's a lot of sexuality and gender and orgasm and sexual fluids going on and genetics and you name it. There's a lot of stuff going on there. And the other pattern I see is trauma. I see a lot of people who are opened up to this reality through their own personal trauma, and that might be physical trauma, that might be emotional trauma, that might be sexual trauma, that might be a lot of different forms. But I do see a kind of traumatic pattern here, and I don't say that reductively, Deb. I'm not reducing it to the trauma. I think the trauma somehow opens people up. It just it puts a hole in people, and they can be impinged upon then more easily.
I like to think of it as the aperture gets opened for
Yeah.
survival reasons.
Yeah.
Courtney, you're up.
Okay, so I'm going to try to tie a couple different ideas together. I had one, but a couple other came up as we all got talking. So I remember at the Archives of the Impossible, you said something. It was one of my biggest takeaways was that, and I might be saying this wrong, so correct me, but you had said, well, the future's already happened, because we were talking about retrocausality, we were talking about the white knight shirt and statistics and all these different things. And that was like one of the overarching things that you said that I was like, wow, he said it. And then one of the other things that I saw was that there were a lot of experiencers there that had needs, that they had like palpable needs for answering of questions. And that really wasn't the right venue for it, but there was this subculture of people there talking about their experiences. And so one of the other things I was thinking about asking you coming into this was, I come from the humanistic approach as well, and psychology. I didn't have religion, but cross-culturally, you explored a lot of that and art and other wonderful things. And so I wanted to ask you about those experiencers that are searching and also their self-awareness. And it's a concept I've been exploring for a little while. Like when experiencers have these experiences and they're using self-awareness to understand what it is, what advice do you give experiencers when they run across that camouflage or that interface of something other that they don't necessarily know how to interpret? We have heard that there's some type of conditioning. When they are faced with that, how do you help them with their self-awareness to move through it in the best possible way? I mean, like, what would be your advice?
Yeah.
I know it's hard, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but like, have you seen things that work?
No, it's okay. First of all, the experiencers challenge me. I don't present myself as an authority over these things. I really want to think out of their experiences that's in a very collaborative way. My sense is that the experiencers push us towards a kind of physical reading of a lot of these events that goes against my own training. We want to, in the study of religion, we want to read things psychologically or spiritually or imaginally, to use a fancy word. But the experiencers push us to see these things more physically. And I want to hear that, and I want to be challenged, and I don't want to present myself as some kind of authority. On the other hand, I want to authorize their experiences. And this is really important. I think the most important thing we can do is frankly listen and take their experiences seriously, by which I mean not reduce them to our worldview. So when I listen to an experiencer, I'm not going to say, oh, well, you experienced X, Y, or Z, or,
Right.
this was because of your own religion, or this was because of your your emotional history or whatever. I'm like, no, no, no. Do not reduce what is being challenged here to something that is comfortable to you, the something you already know. And I think it's that act, frankly, Courtney, that is so powerful to people. Because for better or for worse, they do perceive me as an authority. I think that's a mistake, by the way, but they do. And they perceive the research university as authorizing a particular form of inquiry. And I think that's correct, actually. And that's what I most want to do. And what I most want to help with is essentially mainstreaming this inquiry inside an academic box, as it were. Not because the academic box is perfect, or because academics are somehow smarter or something. It's because that's a place in our culture where we can take things seriously, and we can integrate them over many, many generations. And so that's what I most want to do, is I want to make this thing intergenerational. It isn't about Jeff. It's not about Courtney. It's about our children and our children's children, and this inquiry over many generations, until we can change our worldview and change the story that we live in a way that I think is being called for here. And really, that's how I see a lot of these experiences and a lot of these impossible events. I think they're deep, deep shocks to our stories. And by our stories, I mean our cultural stories. I mean our sense of reality. I mean what we really think is real, and what we most value. And I think we're being called out of that. And I know people, who suffer because of those stories, and they need another story. And I think we're not there at the moment. And maybe we're never there. Maybe human beings are always in the process of telling new stories. And I'm sure the new stories we tell, our great grandchildren are going to say, well, that sucks. That's a stupid story. Let's tell a different story. Okay, tell a different story. Be a different person. Be a different human being. But you know what? Your grandkids are going to think you suck too. And so that's the process that I want to encourage, and authorize. And I happen to be in the academy, so okay, that's what I do, Courtney. It's not that it's perfect. I think filmmakers and novelists and graphic novel writers. I mean, there's all kinds of people who can do this in a way that's more effective, I think. But I'm not in those worlds, so I can't do those things.
Actually, my contemporaries now think my stories suck. So I can only imagine when we get 20, 30 years down the line. I mean, people are going to be like, not only didn't I want to hear it, I really, really don't want to hear it now. So anyway, Dr. Jeff, again, I just want to reiterate your shirt is outstanding, and we may have to compare notes on our clothiers offline. But Jeff, I wanted to let me frame this up for you before I ask for your reaction. So this is Staff Sergeant Dan Sherman, former. He was an ELINT specialist, trained as an ELINT specialist, electronics intelligence in the Air Force. He wrote a book called Way Above Black, which you may or may not be familiar with.
No, I'm not.
And it's a very short, to the point, 60-page book of him going to read in to. He was a police, security police in the Air Force, going to ELINT, and when he got taken to ELINT school, which was a top secret program, he was pulled aside and said, "We want to read you into a gray program, which is umbrellaed by the black program." So people in the Air Force know about the black program. Nobody but a very select group is going to know about this gray program. We want you to be an intuitive communicator with extraterrestrials. And the reason that we want that is because your mother was abducted in 1960, and then she was abducted again in 63 when she was pregnant with you, and you were, let's call it, enhanced. And he was, "Oh my God, am I a hybrid? Am I this? Am I that?" And they're like, "No. You're just have an attenuated ability that all of us have, essentially." So I watched an interview with him that's quite old, probably from the early 2000s, and I read his book. And I want to just get your reaction to the sentence about religion and God. And this came up because I heard you say on a podcast, "God is us." And I love that quote. I wrote that quote down. So if you will, just indulge me for a second here. Going to put on my glasses Okay. Being brought up in the Christian faith, I naturally had so he finally figured out how to communicate with these ETs on a higher level that was not the information that they were asking him to communicate about. And so religion is the subheader here. And he says, "One question I remember quite clearly was when I asked if the ETs, had a soul. As was usually the case, his answer was quite curious. Perhaps someone reading this will be able to understand it better than I. He said that any entity that realizes its own existence has intellect and therefore must have a soul. We, meaning us and them, the ETs, have been created from the same oneness." Parenthetical, my interpretation. "And out of that creation came intellect and non-intellect. There are only forms of life in the universe. They are the only forms of life in the universe. We are both, them and us, along with many other parts, a part of the intellectual aspect creation." When asked if there was a God, he said something like, "The question you ask answers its." He said he's not qualified to answer that question, but he said something like, "The question you ask answers itself." So there you go. Is that, how does God is us play into that? And do you agree that maybe there was this one power that created us and them?
So that's a big question.
It's a guess. I mean, we don't know. It's just a.
Well, okay. So first of all, we know that there are a lot of traditions in the history of religions that deal with different forms of intelligence, all the way up to God. And we know that there are systems of human beings becoming God that are what we call apophatic, that they say away or they deconstruct notions of some kind of objective or some kind of personal God. What I hear in a lot of the extraterrestrial talk is what we'd call demonology or angelology in a kind of Christian theological context if we were living in a medieval
Wow.
worldview. And I don't hear what I don't hear a lot is what I would call mystical literature. In other words, human beings who are affirming their own divinity and who are affirming their own deification, but in an apophatic or a non-saying or deconstructive mode. And so I worry, frankly, I worry about people who are naive. I'm going to say naively. They're naively imposing a kind of religious framework on what is essentially a demonology or an angelology, and they're not aware of these mystical traditions in which human beings are essentially identical to cosmic unity or deity. And what I really think, DJ, is that we're selling ourselves short, and that we're not aware of our own godness, as it were. And that if we were aware of this, and if we listened, if we actually, this is going to sound self-serving, but what I most want these people to do is listen to historians of religion. Just stop it. Just stop it. Stop talking like you know what religion is when you really don't, and listen to people like Nathan here who actually know something about it and who can tell you all about it. And so, and sometimes you do see that, like Matthew Roberts, for example. I don't know if you've had Matthew on
Of
here.
course. Oh no, but we know him. Yeah.
Yeah, well, Matthew is very explicit that what you really need to do is talk to scholars of religion and scholars of the psychology of religion in particular. If you really want to understand what's going on, go talk to them. Don't go talk to the physicist or the rocket scientist or the chemist. Talk to the historian or the psychologist or the philosopher. And I just happen to think that's correct. And we haven't done that culturally. I mean, I can tell you in all certainty that our culture has dismissed people in the humanities and history and philosophy, and because we don't know anything. And I say that with sarcasm. Of course, we know all sorts of things, but they don't want to listen to us. And so let me give you an example. So when NASA puts a panel together to study the potential of extraterrestrial intervention, guess who they put on it? They put on a bunch of scientists.
Yeah.
Okay, well, where's the humanist? Where's the historian? Where's the philosopher? The answer is there is none. So, of course, they're not going to understand what's going on. And so that's what I think needs to happen is we need to stop listening to and I love physicists and I love chemists and I'm not dismissing these people, but please stop listening to them and start listening to the historians of science and to the philosophers and to the humanists who actually know something about what's going on. And then we'll get somewhere. But we're not going to get somewhere until we do that.
So if they would have added like DJ, Nathan, Debs, and Courtney, they would have been exponentially more prepared to understand what's going on.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really disagree with that.
Yep.
No, I'm just kidding. Nate,
that's actually what I'm saying. And yeah.
Well, it seems, Jeff, we've for the longest time now, we've really located reality outside of ourselves. We have denigrated our own experience in favor of what's taking place outside of it,
right?
And trying to say that that's all that there is, and in the process, we've kind of reduced ourselves to a non-player in the story, right? So, for me, like that's the power of this subject. It's the power of this. Really, the encounters that I have with experiencers, and I'm not an experiencer, but sort of coming at their truth, from a place of seriousness, as you would say, really does, I think, re-enchant or resituate reality away from what we all have, I think, been ingrained in, and that's this kind of very strongly materialist worldview. And so, what's odd to me about that, and I want to get your comment on this, is how refreshing that is to the human experience, right? It's if you encounter people who are doing this, it's incredibly refreshing to them. They are energized by this process of re-examining their own experience. And in a way, the phenomena seems to be giving us permission to kind of do that again, or invite us. It's more of an invitation, let's put it that way, to do that again. Have you found similar response from people that, have really engaged on this topic and come to it with that kind of earnest and fresh perspective?
I think what you find, this is a general comment, Nathan, but I think it's fair. I think what you find if you talk to the people who really engage the phenomena is that it ultimately leads back to consciousness. And by consciousness, I don't mean Nathan or Jeff or Deb or Courtney or DJ. I don't mean the ego. I mean some other realm or some other dimension of mind that is vastly superior to our individual selves. But what you find over and over again is that the phenomena is responding to whatever consciousness or to whatever awareness is brought to it. And it has this kind of, dialogic or kind of backwards sort of or loopy nature to it that I think is very difficult for science-minded people, because science is really good at explaining everything except us. It actually leaves out consciousness entirely. And it does that so that it can explain everything. Okay, you can explain everything, but you can only explain everything because you got to determine what everything is. And if everything includes consciousness, then suddenly you can't explain everything. And there's a huge hole in your model of the universe called us, called consciousness or mind, that just finds no place in this objectifying, quantifying, replicating method. And again, that's not to dismiss science or technology. It's just to say it's really good at doing certain things, but it's really horrible or bad at doing other things. And I think the excitement people feel around the UAP or the UFO experience is that it brings consciousness back into the picture again in a pretty dramatic way that is baffling to this materialist or scientific picture of things, but is very familiar to those of us who have spent our lives living and working and interpreting other religious worlds.
Thank you.
Yep. We covered last time, some of the extraordinary things that humans are doing that the phenomenon can't do. We talked about Courtney's Dutch apple crumb pie at Thanksgiving. We spoke about Deb's hamburger helper. We spoke about Nathan splitting wood in the backyard. And actually, I haven't come up with anything that I can do that they can't do yet. But still, no, I'm just kidding.
I never hear about UFOs that look like motorcycles.
That's true.
Oh.
That's true. No, actually, one thing I did think of that just popped into my head this week was kind of how they would look at us, and I thought about a Navy ship. I thought about I think I was listening to maybe Richard Dolan's accounts of naval ship encounters with craft, whether they be aircraft carriers, destroyers, or the like. And I thought, if I were a non-human intelligence and I had my sensors were picking up this enormous power that is generated by either the nuclear reactor or other form of propulsion that a lot of these ships have, and I decide to hover close and examine it, and all of a sudden I'm getting shot at.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? All of a sudden the phalanx system is going off and I'm seeing, 20 millimeter rounds, headed my way. And it very interesting that how must they interpret how aggressive that we are, that just appearing is enough for them to be targeted and shot at. Have you ever thought about how they
Yes.
would?
No, sure. No, of course. I mean, there's a couple thoughts there. One is I don't think these are threats, because
Right.
I think if these were true threats, we'd been toast a long
Mhm.
time ago. I think it's obvious that whatever we're dealing with is so vastly superior to us that it's not even close. So the whole idea of threat it makes me laugh. But if I were interested in my own species' past, I would be very concerned about the development of nuclear power, for example, because it's essentially a bunch of monkeys juggling chainsaws that are going. It's really dumb. And I also, the other thing that I think about a lot is, well, we have this metaphor of AI now because, well, AI is in the news and we think of AI. If I were visiting the tribe of a previous species, I wouldn't go in myself. I'm going to get thrown against the fucking wall, and
Right.
the monkeys are violent. I am not going into that, but I'll send a machine in. That's fine. So I think the whole language and metaphor of AI or the machine or the robot, as we used to call it, is actually quite intuitive to what a future human would how a future human would actually interact with a present human, which is very carefully. And there's Star Trek episodes on this, right? I mean, the prime direct. I mean, we have imagined this. It's not like this is outside the narrative of our imagination, but we have imagined. And what we know from the history of colonialism, by the way, is it's bad. When one civilization interacts with another and it's technologically superior, it does not go well. Okay? It goes really badly. So if you are a technologically superior civilization, you do not want to intervene in the development of a technologically inferior civilization. Okay? So you just don't. I mean, that's just history. That's history 101. So I think there are a lot of, again, good reasons that we see what we see. And there are a lot of good reasons that we don't see what we don't see. Like this silly notion of landing on the White House lawn. Why in the hell would they land on the White House lawn? I mean, that's crazy. That's crazy talk. And so there
What's
are
the White House? What's the White House to them?
Yeah, well, and also why? Yeah, why?
Yeah.
Why would the farmer show up and talk to the pigs and the goats and the cows too? I mean, it's just crazy talk, and it assumes a kind of anthropocentrism that we're somehow the superior species in the universe, and I just seriously doubt that. And I think that's one of the shocks of this phenomenon is that it really shows that we're not.
Yeah. Although, I mean, I don't know if these phenomenon could necessarily produce Led Zeppelin and things like that. But anyway, uh,
Well, probably not. I mean, probably not. But again, what's Led Zeppelin to in the greater picture? I don't know.
well, we would have to see what ETs would think of that music. I mean, we would have to see what their reaction is. But
Right.
anyway, we don't want to keep you any longer because we have hit the 1 hour mark. And that way, when we ask you to come back for a third time, uh, you won't be like, oh, those guys kept me for 2 hours, for an hour and a half. So let's go with Cabby goodbye, starting with Courtney Connected.
It was wonderful having you. Wonderful seeing you again. Thank you for answering my questions. So articulate and eloquent. And for the future, I just want you to know that I'm refamiliarizing myself with the flip. And I just have this burning desire to talk with you in the future about cosmic mindedness
Yeah.
sometime.
Courtney, thank you for coming to Rice and for stopping me. And I always apologize. It's not my prima donna status. It's just being overwhelmed with a lot of guests and a lot of details that I always am. And so thank you for coming.
Yeah, luckily I was with Mike Clellan, so he was like, "Oh yeah, come over and meet him." Because I was like, "Oh no, I don't want to impose upon him." He's like, "Oh, I'll be fine." So he was my lead-in.
Yeah, no, Mike's cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's cool. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Like I said, Courtney connected. Go ahead, Debs.
I wanted to say while we've been talking, I just keep thinking of all these things I'd like to talk to you about. Like that's just how interesting the conversation has been. And I wanted to say also that there are resources that are available for those experiencers that are reaching out to you. Maybe you could just like add Opus's link to their website to your signature when you
Yeah.
respond to people or something like that. So don't put all of it on yourself. After all, your AI is not going to tell you for thousands of years that the answer is 42. And
Right.
there are other humanitarian efforts out there, like the people here that want to help. So if you need help, just let us know. But we very much appreciate everything that you do. You have put yourself as a figurehead in a noble effort. So thank you very much.
Yeah. No, I'm well aware of those networks, and they're all wonderful. And thank you for doing what you're doing.
Yeah, Jeff, it's been a real pleasure having you back with us. And you've got a book. I'm going to plug your book that's coming up in July.
Yeah.
It's called How to Think Impossibly. Did I get that title correct?
Yeah.
And I heard that the foreword was going to be written by Philip Ball. Is that right? Or he has a comment?
Well, Philip wrote a blurb to it.
Okay.
No, there's no forward. There's no forward to it.
Right.
If he wrote a forward to it, that's news to me, Nathan.
Okay, perfect. Great. Well, for those who don't know, Philip Ball is, I think, one of the editors of the journal Nature. He's a science writer. So that's a pretty notable blurb to write for your book. Looking forward to that. That comes out July 12th, I think. Is that right?
Yeah. That sounds right, actually. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, best of luck with that and the rest of your sabbatical. Well deserved. And hopefully we'll have you back with us again in the future.
I hope so. You guys know how to get a hold of me.
And thankfully you answer us. And by the way, so cabbies, what we're going to say, I'm going to say goodbye to Jeff here. We're going to let him go, and then we're going to stay on air and promo our new network, the Untold Radio Network. So, but Jeff, before we do that, I want to say thank you so much for being willing to come on. I know how many podcasts contact you, and we love your work and your positive nature. We'll never forget what you did for our cabbie Matt last time, because boy, some of the paranormal stuff that he has dealt with, I've heard even since that show that he shared is quite traumatizing, and the way that you handled that, I know made him feel better, and I'm deeply appreciative of that. Please let us know. We will promo your book, even though if you're not on, we are still going to throw it up at the beginning of our show. We're starting with a new network on May 9th, but thank you so. Yes, sir. We're very excited about it, and thank you very much for coming and sharing your thoughts and being such a good sport.
Yeah.
All right.
No, it's a pleasure, really, and I mean that. It's not a duty or a performance. It's genuine.
I'm really glad. I'm really glad we had so much fun, and you can laugh with us. So we will invite you on for a Jeff Kripal part 3, kind of like Jaws 3, but it'll be better than that was. All right.
I saw Jaws, by the way. I remember Jaws in the 70s. I didn't see Jaws 3, so let's not go there. Yeah.
We're close in age. I saw Jaws in the theater, Star Wars as a 10-year-old. That'll give you an idea how old I am. So thank you so much, brother. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay.
Thanks, Jeff.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye. All right, cabbies. Great job, guys. I just figured we would promo the network. So May 9th, the only place that you guys will be able to find CAB is on Untold Radio Network. Nathan, do you have anything queued up we can throw up there?
I do not. No? I have nothing.
Okay, we will get it for the next show. We'll get something. We'll get that tile up there so we can show you the logo and we can have the link and so forth. Jules, you'll find all of us there. Jules will be there. Everybody will be there. Hello, Anon. Welcome back. And this is Horse Love Fat. I love that. Somebody's name in the chat. But yeah, so Untold Radio Network. there is a slew of Bigfoot shows, paranormal shows. I'm going to bring it up real quick just so I can I think this is it right here, Untold Radio AM. I'm going to put on my spectacles here. Okay. And next week they're going to be working on our stuff. So, oh boy, here's the show. They have a coffee time. Down South Anomalies, Discover Sasquatch, Grasping Sasquatch, Monsters on the Edge, Mysterious Library, Pine Island Research, Paranormal Spectrum, Talking Weird, The Bigfoot Influencers, Sasquatch Outpost. Jim, I really want to get Jim on from Colorado. He's amazing. Grew up in Zimbabwe, I think. Untold Radio AM and Weird Encounters. A wide open research, and it says Calling All Beings archive. So Calling All Beings is already being listed on their site. And they also are owners of Hangar One Publishing, where you can find books on UFOs, Bigfoot, paranormal. So they're kind of into the same things that we're into. But take it away, Nathan.
Yeah, we're very excited about this opportunity to partner with them.
Who's back?
And the cat is back. There she is. So we're very excited about that. One of the things it's going to allow us to do is to kind of record some of the shows, and then we'll be able to be in the audience and chat while the show premieres. So that'll be a fun way for us to interact with folks that we don't normally get a good chance to interact with while the show is happening. So huge shout out to our listeners and followers. It's been great to kind of get to this point, and hopefully we'll deepen the CAB network further and grow the CAB community.
Yeah, Debs.
I wanted to add that as far as I know, we will be able to link our videos to the show, to the YouTube channel that we currently have. So no one's going to have to go, where do they go? Where do they go? We're still going to be out there. I'm excited to be with so many people who are seasoned in talking about the phenomenon. So that's one of the things I'm really looking forward to. We're going to be connected to a lot more people who are interested in, Bigfoot, ghost, and we're going to be one of the only UFO people, but we've got our stuff together. We're good. So it's going to be great. We'll spread the UFO love.
That's what I was going to say, Court. They're looking to plus up their UFO content. And that's why I think they were interested. They've been on with us, or Doug Highcheck. Sorry, man, Hera's going to take... I think this is how Katiani punishing me by sending Hera the Destroyer in here, because she truly is the disruptor in the house. But anyway, and she's going to claw me here in a second. But Doug is the producer of Monster Quest, those of you who remember that. He's also done work for Nat Geo and other networks, and Legend Meets Science 2, which this is the 2023 he starts shooting. Now she's got the microphone. It's so funny. But Doug started shooting Legend Meets Science 2 10 years after the first one. So he started shooting in 2023. He's not finished yet. But yeah, it's a great group of people, and I think it'll work out really well. Then what do you think, Court? We're going to bring more UFO content to the Bigfoot peoples, homie.
I'm all about it. I'm a big UFO researcher and, kind of a nut, really. So I'm excited about expanding horizons, especially being with Calling All Beings with this partnership. It's going to be pretty fascinating and lovely to see what takes hold and people that are going to find the content.
Yeah, well, Deb, as you were saying, we'll kind of figure out the links, but I think they're going to be able to click on that and come to ours. I'll have to get with, we'll get into some meetings. In fact, I spoke with Doug today. He's going to contact Nathan next week about some of the creative aspects of it that he's asking me stuff today. I'm like, man, if it doesn't have to do with content, don't ask me. I don't know anything. I don't have anything to do with it. That's Nathan. But he'll get with you on that. I'll talk with Alex Highcheck, his son, about the mechanics of it. And but basically that's where you're going to find us on YouTube and on podcasts, is on Untold Radio Network. So Nathan and I kind of will figure out how to make sure we leave that message out there that everybody can can find it on podcasts, etc. But essentially, you'll have to just subscribe. Now, this is not a paid subscription, okay? You can go on your whatever your podcast app and just subscribe or follow our show, and you're going to get CAB every week. It's just that it won't be on the current CAB feed anymore, but it's still not going to cost you anything to watch or listen to CAB on pod. Yeah. All right, what'd you think, man? Dr. Jeff Kripal.
He's the best. How can you not like Jeff Kripal? The guy's amazing.
Court, what'd you think?
He's just such a groovy guy, and he's thoughtful, he's careful, he's considerate, very insightful. I mean, he's just lovely. He's a lovely man.
I couldn't agree more. He's just such a kind person. I mean, he is probably getting requests on the level that Gary Nolan is, and he said yes to us. And maybe not. Gary may be getting, because he's on TV a lot as well. He's on news programs. He's probably getting even more. But we did have Gary once. We really appreciate it. Debs, did we get anything wrong tonight? And how did it go?
Oh, I thought it went well. I feel like he really just makes you want to think about so many other things, and you just want to be that person that tells him your experience for some reason. And his shirt was phenomenal. It was so
my
cool.
God.
I know.
I'm so jealous, man. Yeah, and I'm gonna send him the book from Dan Sherman and see what he thinks. But I think I don't know if he believes that our government has been in contact with them, which I also, as you guys know, I've said it on CAB, I didn't believe it. And now is everybody in unison that they believe that now, or are we in different camps on this?
I'm in a different camp. So I don't think it's the government. I think it's people who are connected maybe to the government, who have some of the skills, some of the resources, but I don't think that this organization that is doing this stuff is so much the government anymore.
Well, what I'm referring to is the Dan Sherman narrative about being trained by the government. It was a joint, I don't know if it was NSA or CIA and Air Force program to learn how to communicate with them.
Yeah,
anyway,
so I think my thing is, and I think I've said this previously, is if you broaden your perspective of what that means to be the government, right? If you broaden it to understand that those people may have been trained by the government, may still be working there, may still have some connection, but are actually working outside of the government, I think that's where some of this really lies.
Well, what he was saying was, I was trained at Fort Meade. So if he's saying that he changed the names of the people, but he's using ranks and he's talking about the programs, and he showed a set of orders. So he's talking about this definitely was if you believe it, I mean, you don't need to believe this, but it was and what it is now, I don't know. I haven't the slightest idea, and I don't have an idea of what happened then. All I know is what he said, and the way that he speaks about it lines up with I believe that he's telling the truth, but I don't have any knowledge of it.
So his experience wasn't direct contact, though, right? It was communication. So that's different. Correct. What I'm talking about is the people who are saying that the government is having direct contact, and I don't think that's happening. I think it's a different group. I think so. He wasn't the first person to come out and say, I've worked for the government, and then we worked with ET essentially, right? I think that there is another group that's doing that work, the physical contact, and you hear these stories that there's a space in a base. It's not always Area 51, and it just seems to be there's a pattern. But I just feel like maybe because of liability, even, it wouldn't be directly the government. That's all.
Yeah, and Court, do you remember Lou Elizondo sort of retweeted somebody that said, I'm trying to figure out what Hera's doing now. She's trying to open a little closed plastic. She's trying to get in the drawer, a plastic container drawer. and pull it open.
Dangerous.
But there's something blocking it, so she's trying hard to. All right, Court, do you remember Andrew something? Lou Elizondo retweeted, "Hey, you should listen to this or take this seriously." Do you guys remember?
Yeah, Andrew Scott. He had one of the largest buyout deals. I think it was by, I don't know if it was by HarperCollins, but it was by one of the big publishers last year. And then we hadn't heard much about it.
Right.
And then Ross Coulthart also covered it. Lou Elizondo and Sean, a couple different people covered that story. And so I haven't heard anything more about the book. To your point, though, about the belief system and whether you believe we're contacting them, I just think it's so fascinating how you think no, right? But then as you get exposed to all this material, you start wading in and you're like, oh, I have to accept this and I have to accept this. Well, today I was reading this really in-depth article. It was written by Richard Dolan and it was Kit Green, and he was having him go on the record. And Kit Green says multiple times that there's a secret space program, that he knows it, that he encountered it. He encountered it on multiple occasions. I'm like looking at that, just going, are you kidding me? Like, I can't accept that. I can't accept that right now. I'm just going to store it, put a pin in it, and, encounter that later. But it comes in waves where you kind of, you can't refute certain things after a while, after you see it enough in the research.
Money.
Yeah, I mean, it's very complicated, right? So, I mean, Courtney makes an excellent point there. And of course, David Grush made claims about agreements between elements of the government and some aspect of whatever this is. So, I do think that in time we will know more, but there's seemingly a mountain of evidence in the record about, sort of hinting that there is something to this and some type of contact. I don't know how extensive it is, how active it is. But there does seem to be at least elements within the government or private industry that have had some degree of contact. What that looks like, and I have no idea. Certainly interesting to speculate about for sure.
And definitely, yeah. I mean, I don't know either. I didn't believe it at all. I said I told Nathan I don't believe this is true, and then 3 things have happened. One was reading this book. And then finding that interview that Courtney's familiar with from the early 2000s, probably more than a decade after he wrote this book. And then there's a friend of mine who you guys are familiar with that's friends with David Grush, that's in the Intel community. And that guy told me that he has, in an environment, read reports about these beings that were held and what kind of things that they experienced. And what he read was disturbing as a human. So when he sent me, he sent me that book, and I don't think he sent me the interview. Someone else did. That might've been Deb that sent me the interview. Somebody else sent me the interview, but he sent me the book. And then he told me that, and I said, okay, yeah, there must be something to this, that they were training people to contact them in the probably late 80s, and who knows how far it dates back, because the thing that makes him really believable is how he doesn't embellish on what he doesn't tell you what he thinks. There's nothing in this book about what he thinks, only what he knows. He doesn't know how far back it goes. He doesn't know how many intuitive communicators there were. He only knew the people in the program that were read in, and when he went to see mental health, he never heard from anybody again. Closed, done, accounts closed. Don't come here, don't show up, blah, 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 blah. When he asked about what the information was, where it would go, that he would type into a box and hit send, he has no idea. Don't know where it went. Only that when I figured out what I thought they were coordinates, and it corroborated that there were abductions associated with that, I said, I'm out of this game. That's a done deal, over. So, but all the things that you would ask him in an interview, what about this? What about that? And what do you think this? He wouldn't tell you anything about what he thinks. He just tells you what he knew to be true based on his experience. And that was very powerful, especially, before we go, I mean, we could take 9 minutes here, but the religious aspect, going back to this, if everybody wants to, let me put on the spectacles again. An entity, perhaps an entity that realizes its own existence has intellect and therefore must have a soul. Anybody?
You know, so here's the thing, right? I've been down the rabbit hole of what counts as intelligence. And I think that we get really caught up in what we think of it in our terms, human terms, right? So that part I'm not so attached to, but I do think if you break things down, things that have DNA probably have a soul. And some spiritualities would disagree with that. They think there's spirits in everything. So I have to give a nod to that. But I do have a feeling that DNA is a key to the soul.
And every living thing on this earth shares majority of our DNA, meaning
Yeah.
us.
And not
Yeah.
to be like rough on humans too much, but if you look at how even bacteria interact, you could be describing humans. All the like it goes from that's the smallest form of DNA on our planet. Um, the interactions are pretty much the same across all species. So although some of them do a little better than we do, like the fungus, they're pretty much in the cooperative mode for the most part, trying to help each other out, work on communication. Wish we were a little bit more like fungus than bacteria sometimes, but yeah, that's my perspective.
I don't know, Deb. I'm a pretty fun guy.
Does anyone?
It's a Deb joke. I couldn't.
I just
I'll be
want
here
to
all
weigh
week.
in on the. I
Please,
just want
ma'am.
to weigh in on that book, DJ. I went and looked it up. It's Simon and Schuster had the bidding war over the book, and the writer's name of the memoir was Scott Andrews. I just wanted to circle back on that because we transposed the name.
Yes, we did.
So.
Thank you. Yeah, that was. And when Lou said that, and he tells a very similar story of the Air Force telling him that his history wasn't what he thought, and then I'd have to go read that tweet again. I don't know if anybody finds it or if anyone knows. Is that a similar narrative, or am I conflating the two? We don't know.
I think it's similar, but what's weird is how often that narrative comes out, right? And then if you dig into it, there really are special schools for gifted children that you have to like be invited to essentially after applying sometimes. There's
Professor X. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, and actually a good example is I think the guy who created Facebook was in one of those at Hopkins.
Mark Zuckerberg.
Zuckerberg.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there's the whole thing about Gordon Cooper. He was on the record about it. I mean, he was famously quoted talking about the special schools for the star kids. So there's other literature that documents this.
Interesting. Well, certainly supports that. Nathan, we have been created from the same oneness, and out of that creation came intellect and non-intellect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's that kind of language. I mean, it's a little bit loaded to a certain degree, but it does, I think, have parallels with non-duality. That that we're all sort of a part of the same thing. We're sort of consciousness exploring itself. So you see those themes popping up pretty often in the sort of experiencer encounter literature, kind of like Jeff said, we are they are us, God is us. So there's this very holistic perspective to all of life. I'm not so certain that there's maybe kind of this stark dualism between things that are conscious and things that are not conscious. I don't know that I necessarily take that perspective. Also, when it comes to the language of the soul, and that's a very loaded term. And so it's, you can take that for what you want, I suppose, but I don't necessarily adhere to the language of the soul in the kind of in the traditional sense of the term. There's this sort of like heavenly realm where souls reside, that is, kind of distinct and apart from reality itself. So yeah, it's interesting though. Interesting to kind of get that in the record. And I think that those exchanges are fascinating. When we have people that, claim to have spoken with these beings and ask these types of questions, and the responses we get are often kind of cryptic in that way. But they're also, I think, to a certain degree, they're heavily interpreted, right? So Dan Sherman in that example is, heavily interpreting what he's getting, because I think, he described the method by which he gets communication. It's not necessarily like it's words per se. It's almost like imagery that he's kind of deciphering in his own words to make sense of it all.
Which adds to his credibility, right? Because he could say that this is what he told me, but he's telling you it's only his interpretation of all of that imagery,
right?
Into then putting it into English, which what can get lost in there?
A lot.
I'm sorry, Deb. Go ahead, ma'am.
I just wanted to share something. I don't normally talk about this too much, but when I was doing meditation, which I essentially stopped because it was just too weird. But one thing that happened was I was like shown that we all have within us God, essentially, but they didn't call it God. And then I say they because in my experience, there were entities there. They said that we all have the source, the God source inside of us. And I took that to mean perhaps it is really literally ingrained in our DNA. And that's what connects everything. So I just wanted to explain that a little further. It's like a cosmic universe, right? It's an internet, so to speak. So we are all a part of that. We're all like little nodes. But that was just a meditation thing. So, but other people have said it too.
I think that's dope. And it's also leads to where we program with this sort of propensity to argue, fight, kill to keep the population of the planet under control. Because obviously, if everybody was trying to help everybody, I mean, who knows what would have happened to the population and what the planet could support. I don't know if that's something that's been there, but let's take what Julie's had to say here. I was in a gifted program called Project Up. So, Jules, you'll have to tell us about that, but let me go to your next point. And, okay, here it is. Okay, not even sure. Well, one of you guys can read that. I'm going to put on these glasses again. Look like I'm at a drive-in theater.
Not even sure why they had it, but they gave us a pass that we could go on our own chill out space with a stereo and bay window and stuff when we were done in regular class with nothing to do. So she's talking about the program. The gifted program.
It sounds like a good party to me. Yeah, Jules, you'll have to tell us a little more about your program. I know Jules is from Indiana, so I don't know where this was at, but yeah, I'd like to hear more about that, Jules. We'll have to have a call. But anyway, it's time to cut the cabbies loose out this joint from After Cab, but I just figured we could talk about Untold Radio Network. We'll have some graphics for our next show, and we'll be ready to party. Who do we got coming up next, Nathan? Let's see. Who are we partying with next?
Check the calendar.
Well,
here.
and I just want to weigh on the intelligence.
Yes, ma'am. Please.
Because I didn't get to, but I think trees and other forms of being that might necessarily not have DNA, I would consider them intelligent. To a
Interesting.
Wait, what doesn't have
I
DNA? What doesn't have DNA? I need to know. Obviously, we know rocks, right? They don't. But yeah, let me know if you want to pass that information on to me, Courtney. I need to know.
Okay.
So, Sean, Bob Pliskin. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, we will have. Look at this, Danny Smith of the Story of podcast. We're gonna have those guys on. He's just messaging me that episode's gonna drop tonight. which means you all probably won't want to listen to it because I'm on it. But talking Bigfoot. But these guys are really cool, and we'll have them on CAB. So yeah, Sean Munger, who is a man, you want to talk about a passionate, fiery government person that is an advocate of. Oh wow, no, that is an advocate of the phenomenon. That is Sean Munger, and I would not want to be Sean Kirkpatrick in a room alone with Sean Munger. Anyway, so thanks a lot, guys. Any parting shots before we sign out?
Yeah, I wanted to say, and it's funny that Courtney used the term the program and that came up. I think that when we are talking about the actual government working with UAPs, the term the program is what they tend to use, which is really interesting. It's like that's the code for it.
Yeah, it was also a sports movie back in the early 2000s about steroid use, but that's besides the point. Uh, thank you. Money Nathan, any parting shots before we go?
I just had a great time in the show today. Great having Jeff back with us, and also great being with all of you guys. Looking forward to the next one, and looking forward to being part of the Untold Radio Network. Also, thank you everyone for listening and watching and following along with our show as we've been on this journey with you. And if you like the show, want to hear more, please do give us a like and subscribe. It does help the show. I know we are transitioning to a new network, but it does help us stay in touch with you until we do. So,
Courtney Connected.
I loved learning more about everyone. Like Nathan, I didn't know about your theological history and seminary and everything. It was nice to learn a little bit about your background and your perspective of where you're coming from. And it's always just nice to be involved with the CAB crew, learning and growing and being part of the crew. It's very enlightening in many ways just to have these conversations.
It's an honor and pleasure to have you. We do it a little bit differently, but we do it. So, Julie, thank you so much for being in the chat tonight. I'm sorry we didn't get to more. We had some very long-winded answers. I had to hold back. I had a couple more follow-ups because you guys asked such great questions that I wanted to follow up on more of them than just Courtney's. But I was like, man, I gotta keep passing the baton, baby. So for Courtney Connected, for Debs, and for Nathan, this is DJ saying peace out. One love. We'll see you down the road. And as always, we're wondering what's up around the bend.